So here's a question for you. What if you could spend your entire career solving the world's biggest, most impossible problems? I mean, it's a powerful idea, right? An inspiring one. But what if that very ambition, that intense desire to do good on a massive scale, what if it's actually built on a really dangerous misunderstanding of how the world really works? Today, we're diving into a major clash of worldviews.
And that idea is captured perfectly here by the actor Stephen Fry. He's talking about the work of Dutch historian Rutger Bregman and his book, Moral Ambition. And honestly, it's an electrifying call to action. It basically urges all of us to look beyond our own little bubbles and find real, lasting fulfillment by doing something big for the world.
To really drive this home, Bregman kicks things off with one single, pretty shocking number, 80,000. Just let that sink in for a second. That's roughly how many hours you are going to spend working in your lifetime. His point is that what you choose to do with all those hours isn't just about paying rent. He argues it's probably the single biggest moral decision you're ever going to make.
And that leads us right into his big idea, the core of his whole argument, something he calls moral ambition. You see, he looks around and sees a world just packed with brilliant, talented people who are, in his opinion, completely wasting that talent on jobs that do nothing to solve our most urgent, pressing problems.
So this is what he means by moral ambition. It's a direct challenge to what we normally think of as a successful career path. Bregman is basically saying that way too many of our best and brightest minds get sucked into these high-paying jobs in places like finance or consulting, fields that, he claims, mostly just shuffle wealth around instead of creating anything of real value for society. He wants them to aim higher, to tackle the really huge stuff.
And really, this is the question at the very heart of his book. It's a beautiful, incredibly idealistic thought. Just imagine for a second, what if the collective brain power of the world's top graduates was aimed squarely at curing diseases or ending poverty? It sounds incredible, but what if the world just doesn't work that way? What if there's some kind of hidden pattern out there that makes this whole beautiful vision way more complicated?
So let's just put a pin in that for a moment and pivot to a completely different perspective. This one doesn't start with a grand ideal. Nope. It starts with a simple but honestly a deeply puzzling observation about how the world actually seems to operate. And it's an observation that challenges some of our most basic assumptions about what's fair. The economist Thomas Sowell points something out that's a little hard to swallow at first. He says that if you look across all of human history, across all cultures, you see the same thing over and over. Profound, lasting inequality between different groups of people isn't some weird fluke caused by injustice. It's the normal state of affairs. It's how humanity works. Statistically, equal outcomes are the real rarity. The big question is, why? Sowell breaks this down with some really simple examples. The Scots, world famous for their whiskey. The French, for their wine. The Germans, beer, of course. Nobody gets upset that the Scots don't make wine as well as the French, right? We just accept it. The geography, the culture, the history, it's all different. He calls these reciprocal inequalities. Every group is great at something, but nobody is great at everything.
And this leads us to what Sowell calls the equal chances fallacy. This is the idea that's baked into so much of our thinking, the belief that if we could just get rid of all discrimination, every group would magically end up with pretty much the same results. Sowell says this is a huge mistake, a kind of social justice fallacy, because it completely ignores all those countless other factors that shape how a group develops. And this idea crashes directly into Bregman's plan. I mean, if the world's problems are this complex, can you really solve them just by throwing smart people at them?
Okay, so if unequal outcomes are the norm, what's the engine driving all of this? To figure that out, we have to zoom in and look at the fundamental logic of how and why each of us as individuals makes the choices we do every single day.
To get our heads around this, we need to talk about a field of study called praxeology. Now, it's a fancy word, but the idea is actually super simple. It's basically the science of why we do what we do. And it all boils down to one fundamental truth. Every single action we take is on purpose. We are all, always, trying to improve our own situation, to move from a state where we feel uneasy or less happy to one where we feel more happy.
And this part is absolutely key. Those goals are deeply personal, they are subjective. What makes one person more happy might be a huge salary, sure, but for someone else it might be more time with their kids, or creating art, or just mastering a difficult skill. From this point of view, even helping someone else is self-interested, not because it's selfish, but because it fulfills your own subjective desire to help. And this idea that everyone has their own valid internal compass, well, it really collides with the notion that there's one single, predefined moral career path for everyone.
Okay, so now let's put these two really powerful ideas side by side. We have Bregman's moral ambition on one side, and on the other, this bottom-up logic of individual action from Sowell and praxeology. What we're looking at here are two totally, fundamentally different paths to trying to improve the world.
And right here is where the two worldviews have their head-on collision. Bregman's vision is top-down. You have smart experts who identify the right problems, and then you direct talented people to go solve them. The view from Sowell and praxeology is the total opposite. It's bottom-up. It argues that real lasting progress doesn't come from a grand plan. It emerges organically from millions of individuals all pursuing their own goals, using their own unique, local knowledge that no central planner, no matter how smart, could ever possibly have.
In fact, this top-down approach runs into two more huge problems that Sowell points out, and these really get to the heart of why so many of these grand plans tend to go off the rails.
First up is the chess pieces fallacy. Planners and idealists often look at people like they're just pieces on a chessboard. They assume you can move them around to get the outcome you want. But we're not inert. We have our own plans, our own goals, our own understanding of our lives. We react, we adapt, and we always respond to new rules and policies in ways the planners never see coming.
Now this quote is incredible. It perfectly illustrates what's called the knowledge fallacy. Think about it. The knowledge you need to make something as simple as a pencil, from the person mining the graphite, to the logger cutting the wood, to the chemist mixing the paint, to the person running the factory machine, it is radically spread out all over the world. No single expert, not even a super genius, could possibly know it all. The knowledge that actually matters, Sowell says, lives inside the population, not in some committee sitting above it.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it creates a pretty profound dilemma for anyone who genuinely wants to make the world a better place. The real conflict here isn't between idealism and cynicism. It's between two different kinds of idealism. One that's driven by a huge top-down vision, and another that's driven by a deep sense of humility about what any one of us can truly know and control.
This quote from Milton Friedman really highlights the ultimate risk we're talking about. When you concentrate power in the hands of a few decision-makers, even with the best, most noble goal in the world, like moral ambition, you're playing a dangerous game. Because good intentions are absolutely no guarantee against unintended and often irreversible consequences.
And that really is the biggest takeaway here. This is not a debate about whether we should try to make the world better. Of course we should. Both of these worldviews agree on that goal. The fundamental disagreement is about the method. Do we do it through a centrally directed, morally ambitious grand plan, or do we do it by empowering millions of individual people to solve the problems they see right in front of them, using their own unique on-the-ground knowledge?
Which brings us to our final cliffhanger question. Rutger Bregman warns us passionately against the risk of apathy, of wasting our talents, of wasting our one precious life. But Thomas Sowell and the logic of praxeology warn us against a different danger, the risk of certainty, the fatal conceit that we know enough to design a better society from the top down. So, what do you think? To better the world, what is the greater risk, our apathy or our certainty?